Hello, welcome to Driven to Win. Once upon a time, in the burning heart of the desert, loyalty was just a word, and betrayal wore the face of a friend. As Conan moves forward with fire in his soul, someone sharpens a dagger behind his back. This is Chapter 5, Treachery. It was not yet noon when Gordon halted the Ruala beside the well of Harith. Scouts sent westward reported no sign of the Turks, and the Arabs went forward with the plans made before leaving the walls. Plans outlined by Gordon and agreed to by Mitkal. First, the tribesmen began gathering rocks and hurling them into the well. "The water's still beneath," Gordon remarked to Olga, "but it'll take hours of hard work to clean out the well so that anybody can get to it. The Turks can't do it under our rifles. If we win, we'll clean it out ourselves so the next travelers won't suffer. Why not take refuge in the sangar ourselves?" she asked. "Too much of a trap. That's what we're using it for. We'd have no chance with them in open fight, and if we laid an ambush out in the valley, they'd simply fight their way through us. But when a man's shot at in the open, his first instinct is to make for the nearest cover, so I'm hoping to trick them into going into the sangar. Then we'll bottle them up and pick them off at our leisure. Without water, they can't hold out long. We shouldn't lose a dozen men, if any. It seems strange to see you solicitous about the lives of these Ruala. Who are your enemies, after all?" She laughed. "Instinct, maybe. No man fit to lead wants to lose any more of them than he can help. Just now, these men are my allies, and it's up to me to protect them as well as I can. I'll admit I'd rather be fighting with the Juhaina. Faisal's messenger must have started for the walls hours before I supposed he would. And if the Turks surrender, what then? I'll try to get them to Lawrence, all but Osman Pasha." Gordon's face darkened. "That man hangs if he falls into my hands. How will you get them to Lawrence? The Ruala won't take them." "I haven't the slightest idea. But let's catch our hare before we start broiling him. Osman may whip the daylights out of us. It means your head if he does," she warned with a shudder. "Well, it's worth 10,000 pounds to the Turks." He laughed and moved to inspect the partly ruined hut. Olga followed him. Mitkal, directing the blocking of the well, glanced sharply at them, then noted that a number of men were between them and the gate, and turned back to his overseeing. "Shh! El Borak!" It was a tense whisper, just as Gordon and Olga turned to leave the hut. An instant later, they located a tousled head thrust up from behind a heap of rubble. It was the boy Musa, who obviously had slipped into the hut through a crevice in the back wall. "Watch from the door and warn me if you see anybody coming." Gordon muttered to Olga, "This lad may have something to tell." "I have, Effendi." The boy was trembling with excitement. "I overheard the sheikh talking secretly to his black slave, Hassan. I saw them walk away among the palms while you and the woman were eating at the walls, and I crept after them, for I feared they meant you mischief, and you saved my life. El Borak, listen. Mitkal means to slay you, whether you win this battle for him or not. He was glad you slew the Kurd, and he is glad to have your aid in wiping out these Turks. But he lusts for the gold the other Turks will pay for your head. Yet he dares not break his word and the covenant of the salt openly. So, if we win the battle, Hassan is to shoot you and swear you fell by a Turkish bullet." The boy rushed on with his story. "Then Mitkal will say to the people, 'El Barak was our guest and ate our salt. But now he is dead, through no fault of ours, and there is no use wasting the reward. So we will take off his head and take it to Damascus, and the Turks will give us 10,000 pounds. Gordon smiled grimly at Olga's horror. That was typical Arab logic. It didn't occur to Mitkal that Hassan might miss his first shot and not get a chance to shoot again, I suppose. He suggested, "Oh yes, Effendi. Mitkal thinks of everything. If you kill Hassan, Mitkal will swear you broke the covenant yourself by spilling the blood of a Ruala or a Ruala's servant, which is the same thing, and will feel free to order you beheaded." There was genuine humor in Gordon's laugh. "Thanks, Musa. If I saved your life, you've paid me back. Better get out now, before somebody sees you talking to us." "What shall we do?" exclaimed Olga, pale to the lips. "You're in no danger," he assured her. She colored angrily. "I wasn't thinking of that. Do you think I have less gratitude than that Arab boy? That sheikh means to murder you, don't you understand? Let's steal camels and run for it." "Run where?" "If we did, they'd be on our heels in no time, deciding I'd lied to them about everything. Anyway, we wouldn't have a chance. They're watching us too closely. Besides, I wouldn't run if I could. I started to wipe out Osman Pasha, and this is the best chance I see to do it. Come on, let's get out in the sangar before Mitkal gets suspicious." As soon as the well was blocked, the men retired to the hillsides. Their camels were hidden behind the ridges, and the men crouched behind rocks and among the stunted shrubs along the slopes. Olga refused Gordon's offer to send her with an escort back to the walls, and stayed with him, taking up a position behind a rock, Osman's pistol in her belt. They lay flat on the ground, and the heat of the sun-baked flints seeped through their garments. Once she turned her head and shuddered to see the blank black countenance of Hassan regarding them from some bushes a few yards behind them. The black slave, who knew no law but his master's command, was determined not to let Gordon out of his sight. She spoke of this in a low whisper to the American. "Sure," he murmured. "I saw him, but he won't shoot till he knows which way the fight's going and is sure none of the men are looking." Olga's flesh crawled in anticipation of more horrors. If they lost the fight, the enraged Rualas would tear Gordon to pieces. Supposing he survived the encounter, if they won, his reward would be a treacherous bullet in the back. The hours dragged slowly by. Not a flutter of cloth, no lifting of an impudent head betrayed the presence of the wild men on the slopes. Olga began to feel her nerves quiver. Doubts and forebodings gnawed maddeningly at her. "We took position too soon. The men will lose patience. Osman can't get here before midnight. It took us all night to reach the well." "Bedouins never lose patience when they smell loot," he answered. "I believe Osman will get here before sundown. We made poor time on a tiring camel for the last few hours of that ride. I believe Osman broke camp before dawn and pushed hard." Another thought came to torture her. Suppose he doesn't come at all? Suppose he has changed his plans and gone somewhere else? The Ruala will believe you lied to them. Look, the sun hung low in the west, a fiery, dazzling ball. She blinked, shading her eyes. Then the head of a marching column grew out of the dancing heat waves. Lines of horsemen, gray with dust, files of heavily laden baggage camels, with the captive women riding them. The standard hung loose in the breathless air. But once, when a vagrant gust of wind, hot as the breath of perdition, lifted the folds, the white wolf's head was displayed, crushing proof of idolatry and heresy. In their agitation, the Ruala almost betrayed themselves. Even Mitkal turned pale. "Allah, sacrilege, forgotten of God. Hell shall be thy portion." "Easy," hissed Gordon, feeling the semi-hysteria that ran down the lurking lines. "Wait for my signal. They may halt to water their camels at the well." Osman must have driven his people like a fiend all day. The women drooped on the loaded camels. The dust-caked faces of the soldiers were drawn. The horses reeled with weariness. But it was soon evident that they did not intend halting at the well with their goal, the walls of Suleiman, so near. The head of the column was even with the sangar when Gordon fired. He was aiming at Osman, but the range was long. The sun glare on the rocks dazzling. The man behind Osman fell, and at the signal the slopes came alive with spurting flame. The column staggered. Horses and men went down, and stunned soldiers gave back a ragged fire that did no harm. They did not even see their assailants save as bits of white cloth bobbing among the boulders. Perhaps discipline had grown lax during the grind of that merciless march. Perhaps panic seized the tired Turks. At any rate, the column broke and men fled toward the sangar without waiting for orders. They would have abandoned the baggage camels. Had not Osman ridden among them? Cursing and striking with the flat of his saber, he made them drive the beasts in with them. I hoped they'd leave the camels and women outside, grunted Gordon. Maybe they'll drive them out when they find there's no water. The Turks took their positions in good order, dismounting and ranging along the wall. Some dragged the Arab women off the camels and drove them into the hut. Others improvised a pen for the animals with stakes and ropes between the back of the hut and the wall. Saddles were piled in the gate to complete the barricade. The Arabs yelled taunts as they poured in a hail of lead, and a few leaped up and danced derisively, waving their rifles. But they stopped that when a Turk drilled one of them cleanly through the head. When the demonstration ceased, the besiegers offered scanty targets to shoot at. However, the Turks fired back frugally and with no indication of panic, now that they were under cover and fighting the sort of a fight they understood. They were well protected by the wall from the men directly in front of them, but those facing north could be seen by the men on the south ridge, and vice versa. But the distance was too great for consistently effective shooting at these marks by the Arabs. "We don't seem to be doing much damage," remarked Olga presently. "Thirst will win for us," Gordon answered. "All we've got to do is to keep them bottled up. They probably have enough water in their canteens to last through the rest of the day. Certainly no longer. Look, they're going to the well now." The well stood in the middle of the enclosure, in a comparatively exposed area, as seen from above. Olga saw men approaching it with canteens in their hands, and the Arabs, with sardonic enjoyment, refrained from firing at them. They reached the well, and then the girl saw the change come over them. It ran through their band like an electric shock. The men along the walls reacted by firing wildly. A furious yelling rose, edged with hysteria, and men began to run madly about the enclosure. Some toppled, hit by shots dropping from the ridges. "What are they doing?" Olga started to her knees and was instantly jerked down again by Gordon. The Turks were running into the hut. If she had been watching Gordon, she would have sensed the meaning of it, for his dark face grew suddenly grim. "They're dragging the women out," she exclaimed. "I see Osman waving his saber. What? Oh God, they're butchering the women." Or above the crackle of shots rose terrible shrieks and the sickening chack of savagely driven blows. Olga turned sick and hid her face. Osman had realized the trap into which he had been driven, and his reaction was that of a mad dog. Recognizing defeat in the blocked well, facing the ruin of his crazy ambitions by thirst and Bedouin bullets, he was taking this vengeance on the whole Arab race. On all sides the Arabs rose howling, driven to frenzy by the sight of that slaughter. That these women were of another tribe made no difference. A stern chivalry was the foundation of their society, just as it was among the frontiersmen of early America. There was no sentimentalism about it. It was real and vital as life itself. The Ruala went berserk when they saw women of their race falling under the swords of the Turks. A wild yell shattered the brazen sky, and recklessly breaking cover, the Arabs pelted down the slopes, howling like fiends. Gordon could not check them, nor could Mitkal. Their shouts fell on deaf ears. The walls vomited smoke and flame as withering volleys raked the oncoming hordes. Dozens fell, but enough were left to reach the wall and sweep over it in a wave that neither lead nor steel could halt. And Gordon was among them. When he saw he could not stop the storm, he joined it. Mitkal was not far behind him, cursing his men as he ran. The sheikh had no stomach for this kind of fighting, but his leadership was at stake. No man who hung back in this charge would ever be able to command the Ruala again. Gordon was among the first to reach the wall, leaping over the writhing bodies of half a dozen Arabs. He had not blazed away wildly as he ran like the Bedouins, to reach the wall with an empty gun. He held his fire until the flame spurts from the barrier were almost burning his face, and then emptied his rifle in a point-blank fusillade that left a bloody gap where there had been a line of fierce dark faces an instant before. Before the gap could be closed, he had swarmed over and in, and the Ruala poured after him. As his feet hit the ground, A rush of men knocked him against the wall, and a blade, thrusting for his life, broke against the rocks. He drove his shortened butt into a snarling face, splintering teeth and bones, and the next instant, a surge of his own men over the wall cleared a space about him. He threw away his broken rifle and drew his pistol. The Turks had been forced back from the wall in a dozen places now, and men were fighting all over the Sangar. No quarter was asked, none given. The pitiful headless bodies sprawled before the blood-stained hut had turned the Bedouins into hot-eyed demons. The guns were empty now, all but Gordon's automatic. The yells had died down to grunts, punctuated by death howls. Above these sounds rose the chopping impact of flailing blades, the crunch of fiercely driven rifle butts. So grimly had the Bedouins suffered in that brainless rush that now they were outnumbered, and the Turks fought with the fury of desperation. It was Gordon's automatic, perhaps, that tipped the balance. He emptied it without haste and without hesitation, and at that range he could not miss. He was aware of a dark shadow forever behind him, and turned once to see Black Hassan following him, smiting methodically right and left with a heavy scimitar already dripping crimson. Even in the fury of the strife, Gordon grinned. The literal-minded Sudanese was obeying instructions to keep at El Borak's heels. As long as the battle hung in doubt, he was Gordon's protector, ready to become his executioner the instant the tide turned in their favor. Faithful servant, called Gordon sardonically. Have a care lest these Turks cheat you of my head. Hassan grinned, speechless. Suddenly blood burst from his thick lips and he buckled at the knees. Somewhere in that rush down the hill, his black body had stopped a bullet. As he struggled on all fours, a Turk ran in from the side and brained him with a rifle butt. Gordon killed the Turk with his last bullet. He felt no grudge against Hassan. The man had been a good soldier and had obeyed orders given him. The Sangar was a shambles. The men on their feet were less than those on the ground, and all were streaming blood. The white wolf standard had been torn from its staff and lay trampled under vengeful feet. Gordon bent, picked up a saber and looked about for Osman. He saw Mitkal running toward the horse pen, and then he yelled a warning, for he saw Osman. The man broke away from a group of struggling figures and ran for the pen. He tore away the ropes and the horses, frantic from the noise and smell of blood, stampeded into the Sangar, knocking men down and trampling them. As they thundered past, Osman, with a magnificent display of agility, caught a handful of flying mane and leaped on the back of the racing steed. Mitkal ran toward him, yelling furiously and snapping a pistol at him. The sheikh, in the confusion of the fighting, did not seem to be aware that the gun was empty, for he pulled the trigger again and again as he stood in the path of the oncoming rider. Only at the last moment did he realize his peril and leap back. Even so, he would have sprung clear had not his sandal heel caught in a dead man's abba. Mitkal stumbled, avoided the lashing hoofs, but not the down flailing saber in Osman's hand. A wild cry went up from the Ruala as Mitkal fell, his turban suddenly crimson. The next instant, Osman was out of the gate and riding like the wind, straight up the hillside to where he saw the slim figure of the girl to whom he now attributed his overthrow. Olga had come out from behind the rocks and was standing in stunned horror watching the fight below. Now she awoke suddenly to her own peril at the sight of the madman charging up the slope. She drew the pistol Gordon had taken from him and opened fire. She was not a very good shot. 3 bullets missed. The 4th killed the horse, and then the gun jammed. Gordon was running up the slope as the Apaches of his native southwest run, and behind him streamed a swarm of Ruala. There was not a loaded gun in the whole horde. Osman took a shocking fall when his horse turned a somersault under him, but rose, bruised and bloody, with Gordon still some distance away. But the Turk had to play hide-and-seek for a few moments among the rocks with his prey, before he was able to grasp her hair and twist her screaming to her knees. And then he paused, an instant to enjoy her despair and terror. That pause was his undoing. As he lifted his saber to strike off her head, steel clanged loud on steel. A numbing shock ran through his arm and his blade was knocked from his hand. His weapon rang on the hot flints. He whirled to face the blazing slits that were Elborak's eyes. The muscles stood out in cords and ridges on Gordon's sunburnt forearm in the intensity of his passion. "Pick it up, you filthy dog," he said between his teeth. Osman hesitated, stooped, caught up the saber, and slashed at Gordon's legs without straightening. Gordon leaped back, then sprang in again the instant his toes touched the earth. His return was as paralyzingly quick as the death leap of a wolf. It caught Osman off balance, his sword extended. Gordon's blade hissed as it cut the air, slicing through flesh, gritting through bone. The Turk's head toppled from the severed neck and fell at Gordon's feet, the headless body collapsing in a heap. With an excess spasm of hate, Gordon kicked, the head savagely down the slope. "Oh!" Olga turned away and hid her face. But the girl knew that Osman deserved any fate that could have overtaken him. Presently, she was aware of Gordon's hand resting lightly on her shoulder, and she looked up, ashamed of her weakness. The sun was just dipping below the western ridges. Musa came limping up the slope, bloodstained but radiant. "The dogs are all dead, Effendi," he cried, industriously shaking a plundered watch in an effort to make it run. "Such of our warriors as still live are faint from strife, and many sorely wounded. There is none to command now but thou." "Sometimes problems settle themselves," mused Gordon. "But at a ghastly price. If the Ruala hadn't made that rush, which was the death of Hassan and Mithal. Oh well, such things are in the hands of Allah, as the Arabs say. 100 better men than I have died today. But by the decree of some blind fate, I live." Gordon looked down on the wounded men. He turned to Musa. "We must load the wounded on camels," he said, "and take them to the camp at the walls where there's water and shade. Come." As they started down the slope, he said to Olga, "I'll have to stay with them till they're settled at the walls. Then I must start for the coast. Some of the Ruala will be able to ride, though, and you need have no fear of them. They'll escort you to the nearest Turkish outpost." She looked at him in surprise. "Then I'm not your prisoner?" He laughed. "I think you can help Faisal more by carrying out your original instructions of supplying misleading information to the Turks. I don't blame you for not confiding even in me. You have my deepest admiration, for you're playing the most dangerous game a woman can." "Oh." She felt a sudden warm flood of relief and gladness that he should know she was not really an enemy. Musa was well out of earshot. "I might have known you were high enough in Faisal's counsels to know that I really am Gloria Willoughby, the cleverest, most daring secret agent the British government employs," he murmured. The girl impulsively placed her slender fingers in his, and hand in hand they went down the slope together. The swords are sheathed, the traitors lie silent, and Conan walks alone through the ashes of war. But this wasn't just a fight, it was a message. That in the heart of the desert, only the strong write their names in blood. His legend doesn't end here. It only begins. Thank you for joining us on this brutal, beautiful journey. This was Son of the White Wolf, and you were watching Driven to Win.